Minister, I just want to make a point at the outset. I think there is a question about transparency. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but there are a number of things that are happening now in terms of the response to COVID that kind of don't add up for people. And one of those is the fact that the test numbers are so low. And, you know, people have heard for many weeks now that we should be doing 15,000 tests a day, and that's not happening. And in fact, the numbers are really low. And that calls into question the whole strategy. And indeed, it questions some of the data that's being used, because clearly we're operating off theoretical models rather than real-time, real data. And when people are listening to this every evening, they're saying they can't figure it out because it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I would appeal to people to just level with the public. You know, the public has kept with the government and the health authorities and all of that, and stuck with this and have been remarkably kind of cooperative. But it's important that there's absolute transparency and clarity in relation to the data. And also that where serious problems arise, that they're explained. Like, you know, there are worldwide kind of shortages of different products that are required. And that needs to be explained to people rather than, you know, glossing it over. So I just make that point. And the more data that the public gets, the better. And the more upfront everybody is in telling people what the situation is, frankly, the better. So just in respect of that figure of 15,000 tests, like the strategy isn't working unless we're doing that level of testing. And we can't get to a point where we can consider lifting the restrictions until we have that level of testing. So, like, I know what some of the difficulties are, and I raised that with the Taoiseach about intervening in relation to the reagent. But at this point, what is your estimate of the date or how soon we will get to a point where there will be end-to-end testing being done at a level of about 15,000 a day? So what's your estimate of that? The other point in relation to data relates to the situation in nursing homes. And I mean, it is a matter of regret that it took up to last Friday night to get a figure on the number of deaths in nursing homes. And that shouldn't have been the case. And we now know that between nursing homes and other residential settings, that more than half of the number of deaths, I think it's currently at about 54%, more than half the number of deaths took place in these settings, and yet those figures weren't being provided. Now, last Friday night, as I say, for the first time, we got the figure for the number of deaths in nursing homes. I think what we need to be getting on a regular basis is the number of deaths in nursing homes or residents of nursing homes who have died in hospital. The number of deaths in disability centres, and certainly there's some very concerning news coming out today, and it shouldn't be like that, you know, we're depending on individual reporters about deaths in disability centres and in mental health settings. So I'd make an appeal to you I have given you notice of looking for those figures now, and I hope you can provide them. But I'd appeal to you to arrange for those figures to be provided on a regular basis now, so that we get a full picture of what's happening and the scale of the challenge and what the response needs to be. There is also an issue about figures that we get about clusters. And really, to say there's 206 clusters or whatever is not very helpful. I think we need to know, are these small clusters of just 2 people? Are there clusters of between 5 and 10, between 10 and 20? And I think it would be very helpful if we had a breakdown of those figures, which would then inform the response that needs to happen. There is another issue also in relation to data, and I've written to the HPSC about this, but haven't got a reply yet. And that is that they look at different age cohorts in terms of prevalence and also death rates. But then they get to 65, and it's 65 plus. Now, I don't know what the rationale for that is, but I think we should be getting the data 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and 85 plus. And I'd ask that you would pursue that and see if it can be provided. My final question is, again, by getting back to nursing homes, and I've written to you about this, Minister. I've written to HICWA about it as well. I mean, what are the protocols that have been followed in terms of a nursing home resident getting COVID, and who decides and on what basis whether that person goes into a hospital for treatment in an acute hospital or remains in the nursing home? And they're legitimate decisions, but who takes those decisions? Are they taken by clinicians in this? And if the decision is taken for the person to remain in the nursing home, how are we in a position to provide palliative care? Is palliative care being provided in those circumstances? Because again, this whole issue in nursing homes is exposing the weaknesses in how we provide services, as it has done in a number of different areas, where there's been a tendency over recent years to privatise a lot of those services and disconnect them from the public health service. And, given that sometimes these nursing homes are regarded as investment opportunities rather than care centres, and things are cut to the bone in terms of staffing levels, I have a real concern that there isn't adequate palliative care available in these nursing homes for those patients who sadly remain in nursing homes and will see out their days as victims of COVID in those nursing homes. So I'd appreciate answers to those questions.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I just want to say at the outset, I think we're going to need a very serious conversation about how we care for older people at the end of this pandemic. I think the Deputy is 100% correct. The current model is not fit for purpose. So I'd love to talk about that longer. We don't have time, but it isn't. On the issue of testing, and look, on the issue of transparency, Deputy Shortall has been constructive throughout this, and she's right. We need to continue to put as much information out there as possible. I am making that point. We are striving to do that. We've carried out 90,646 tests so far in Ireland. We are testing, and I think you recognise that, more per head of population than most countries, and consistently testing in the highest quartile, in the top 5 in Europe, the highest quartile in the world. The demand at the moment is about 2,700 tests a day. You're right, though, that's a suppressed demand because of the case definition. It's about 1,200 from GPs a day and 1,500 from hospitals. It varies day to day. The HSE CEO, and I'm saying this so we don't make political commitments, the HSE CEO told me as of today that they expect to have lab capacity of 10,000 tests from next week. That's on foot of bringing on the German lab, which is progress. But what I want to focus on, and I think what we all want to focus on, is the turnaround time rather than the actual number. Because some days we'll need to do 10,000 tests, some days it might be less, some days it may be much, much more. It's the turnaround time. Can we test everyone that Dr. Tony Hoolan would like tested? And can we test them quickly and get the results quickly? So between now and the end of the week, the HSE is doing a body of work, and I welcome the fact they've appointed one person to coordinate all this end-to-end testing, to set turnaround targets for each of the 3 stages, because there are 3 stages: the swabbing, the lab testing, the contact tracings, to then re-engineer all 3 stages to enable a turnaround target to be set from end to end, and to list any of the constraints that exist in the processes and to remove them. And then they're going to model the various volumes of testing, run through the process to assess the robustness, and then from next week, NPHET is going to alter the case definition. But we do need to line up the capacity with the case definition so we don't end up in the situation we ended up on the 18th of March this week. On the issue of nursing homes, just in the time available to me, in relation to, I think your first question was about the breakdown between the categories that I've been given are nursing homes, community hospitals and residential settings. So I'm going to give you them. It's 245 deaths in nursing homes, 28 in community hospitals and 17 in residential institutions. So it's 290 tragic deaths. Our hearts and prayers are with all of them. 245 in nursing homes, 28 in community hospitals and 17 in residential institutions. I'm delighted you brought up the issue of clusters. I've been making this point for a long time. People are getting the wrong impression. If 2 people live in, if you and your husband or somebody else live at home and you both get COVID-19 and are doing well, you're a cluster. That doesn't tell us much. That's very different to a situation where there's an uncontrolled outbreak. So I think the phrase cluster can be misleading. A cluster actually can be, 80% of us will get this virus in a mild manner, so it can be misleading. I agree with you on the HPSC, the data. Why do we stop at 65 and just stick a plus after it? I'll follow that up with them. And just on the issue of who makes the decisions, because this is an important point, who makes the decisions in terms of what should happen in terms of the clinical care of somebody. I'm sorry, I seem to have lost my page in this regard, but the decision is made by what's classified as the person in charge. Thank you very much. Noel. And the person in charge is meant to be a healthcare professional. Sorry, I have a definition here. It's outlined in the Health Act 2007, the care and welfare of residents in designated centres for older people. So I'll send these to the deputy in writing in the interest of time. But can I just say, in the terrible tragedy we did see in Portlaoise, what I was pleased to see happen was to hear Dr. Niamh this morning confirm that consultants from the local hospital were involved in the decision making as to whether people should move to hospital or not, and that palliative care consultants were also provided. That has to be our obligation during this pandemic, in Corla. It can't be what setting you're in. It's how we care for you, whatever setting you live in. And I think that's the approach we have to take.